I would say I'm going to have to reject premise one on what I consider to be contradictory attributes. But before I give you those, let me just say, Dr. Platinga here has kind of defined himself to victory, it seems to me, by saying that this maximally great being exists in all possible worlds. This is, of course, a possible world. So by definition, here he is, and there is really even no debate. And similarly, I have, and goes beyond this, we won't get into this, but I have a problem with this all logically possible world arguments anyway, because I don't believe there's any world that's logically possible other than the one that we have. But anyway,
I don't think you really believe that, Bob. That's
yes,
got
I
to
really
be a
do.
misunderstanding, because you don't think that everything that happens logically necessarily, that you have no free will, for example, that it would be logically impossible for you to lower your hand right now.
Well, maybe we have different ideas of what a possible world is. Maybe
Well,
I'm
that's what I
talking
was
about
saying.
a
I think
possible
that
universe
you
or something.
can't
But
think
I'm
everything.
saying that I don't think there's any, from my understanding of his possible world, any world that you could conceive of, this being would have to exist in. And this is why first of all, I don't believe there can be another world besides what we have. Now, the world has various turns and different futures and different things but how can there be another, for instance, universe or reality other than the one that we have?
All right, now let's answer that question by your choosing to do something different. In this world, you will get up and go to lunch, say, in a few minutes.
Okay.
But you have freedom of the will, I believe,
Right.
and you could choose instead to just remain seated, and then a different world would exist than the one that will in fact exist.
Well, see, I would say it's the same world. It's just the fact that I have different choices. It's the same world. We all have different choices within the same world. But,
well, now, it's not the same world in the sense that different events occur. And so if a world is simply a description of the way reality is, those aren't the same description. They have different events in them, and so they're different descriptions, and that's all a world means here is a maximum description of reality.
yeah, I'm not looking at it quite from the way you do. But anyway, here's
ahead.
the situation that I would say. I believe there are contradictory attributes here in his maximally great being. First of all, he says he's maximally great, and therefore maximally good. Then he says he exists in all possible worlds. Well, I don't think those two things go together. If you have a maximally great being, there is no way he's going to exist in but a very small minority of all the worlds that we can conjure up, because they would be abhorrent to him.
Okay, this is a very good point that Bob is making here. A very good point. Intuitively, we would think that it's logically possible that there would be a world in which there would be no higher life form, say, than rabbits, who are diseased and sick and exist in a state of continual pain and suffering. That seems to be logically possible. But I think Bob is quite right in saying God would never permit such a world. He's too good. He wouldn't create such a world. So what that means is that if God does exist, that envisioned world of animal pain and suffering isn't really logically possible after all. That isn't a logically possible world. So what is implied here is that if you believe in God as a metaphysically necessary being, this is going to radically affect your view of what is possible or impossible. Certain things that look like they're possible turn out really not to be possible after all. Another example would be a world in which every human being rejects Christ and goes to hell. I think that's incompatible with the goodness of God, that God wouldn't create such a thing. So what that means is that really isn't a possible world. That really is a logically impossible or incoherent state of affairs. So you're quite right, Bob, I think in your intuition here, that certain sorts of states of affairs are going to be incompatible with God and his existence. But I think that most Christian philosophers would, rather than deny then that God is metaphysically necessary, which would make God a contingent being, I don't think we want to say that God's contingent. What they will prefer to do is revise their views of possible worlds rather than revise their concept of God as being metaphysically necessary and all good. You've got to revise something, and I think most of us would say you revise your concept of what's really logically possible rather than revise the concept of God so that he's no longer the greatest conceivable being. Joe, and this will be our last question, then I'll let you go.